After being diagnosed with a degenerative joint disease, Mr. Smith became unable to continue his job in construction. For years, he lived out of a camper van until one day the van was towed. Being unable to afford the cost of reclaiming it, he was forced to live on the streets of Boise, Idaho. It was a matter of time before Mr. Smith received a citation for illegal camping, coupled with a jail sentence of 100 days. In this time, Mr. Smith lost his tent, stove, and fishing equipment, everything he had relied on to sustain his life. In only one instance of criminalizing the act of being homeless, an individual was stripped of their autonomy and property, all as a result of a disease entirely behind their control. On any given day in the United States, an estimated 653,104 people experience homelessness, 256,610 of which lack access to shelter, more specifically reside somewhere where human habitancy was not intended. Of the unsheltered, this total represents the greatest number of affected individuals reported since the count began in 2007. Moreover, with the rise in unsheltered individuals, the nationwide acceptance and implementation of anti-nuisance laws have become more prevalent, with almost each of the largest cities imposing some variation of the law. These laws generally allow officers the right to criminalize individuals for engaging in acts associated with homelessness. Individuals may be cited for sitting or lying down, loitering, holding possessions, and sleeping in public, each of which is harmless to the well-being of the public. They may also face being cited for public urination and defecation, which, while this could be more accepted as punishable, it still falls beyond the choice of the individual. Rather, it's likely they had no other option. When cited, individuals face fines, many of which exceed what the individual is able to pay, resulting in potential jail time, increased debt, and the fear of being forced out of a city entirely. With these punishments, individuals facing homelessness may then face a greater challenge in qualifying for housing options, employment, and education, seemingly placing them at worse odds in escaping homelessness than before the officer intervention intending to help. While the enforcement of anti-nuisance laws aimed at decreasing the number of individuals experiencing homelessness that appear visible to the public may be advertised as promoting safety and better tourism, all of which stemming from a place of compassion fatigue, they instead function to exacerbate the hardships experienced by those individuals, inflicting penalties that deny them their basic needs and rights, making it more challenging to escape homelessness itself. Rather than allocating substantial time, money, and resources towards attempting to render homelessness invisible, the focus should be shifted towards addressing the root cause of homelessness through the fostering of greater access, availability, accountability, and support for these individuals. While homelessness is far from new, the 1980s were characterized by a rise in homelessness in line with the recession of 1981 to 1982. Prior to this time, street homelessness was typically characterized by men who lacked socialization skills to allow them to succeed in the workplace and community. However, when the recession hit, housing affordability, high cost of living, and unemployment became a primary concern. Although shelters can and are seen as a viable option for individuals facing homelessness, many individuals will choose to live on the street. An individual facing homelessness voiced why this may be on an NPR interview, asserting that shelters can get crowded and in some cases unsafe. It's possible that personal items may get stolen, violence may break out, personal space may be violated, and hygiene concerns will not be met. Because of this, individuals may prefer the street where they feel a greater sense of autonomy. Characterizations of homelessness, particularly of street homelessness, appear through commonalities in race, education, social, and mental backgrounds. These trends continue to appear today, where street homelessness is characterized by individuals likely to have a past of drugs, alcohol, or mental illness. While it's important to consider that not all individuals experiencing homelessness fall under these categories, those who do are more likely to face discrimination when applying for assistance programs, shelters, or housing by nature. Considering this, anti-nuisance provisions against these individuals come at a heightened cost, as these individuals are already traditionally marginalized in society. Those supporting and enforcing anti-nuisance laws rationalize these practices as an effort to increase and maintain inner-city safety, suggesting that street homelessness fosters unsafe city spaces. Kelling and Wilson detail an important example of the justification behind this idea, in which two automobiles are displayed with their hood up and license plate removed, one on the streets of the Bronx and one in Palo Alto, California. Within minutes, the car in the Bronx was met by a family that removed the battery and radiator, and by the end of the day, almost everything had been taken from the car. What followed was the destruction of the vehicle, part for part, all of which seemingly done by well-dressed white individuals. In the same time frame, the car in Palo Alto remained undamaged. Part of the Palo Alto car was then smashed, and soon following this destruction, the car was brutally destroyed again by well-dressed white individuals. Described here is the Stanford psychologist Philip Zimbardo's 1969 social experiment testing the broken window theory, which argues that when a window in a building is left broken, the rest of the window will soon be broken as well. Whereas in the Bronx, the car's abandonment was a familiar sight, signaling a lack of care and immediate turn to vandalism, the car in Palo Alto was not. However, when the car in Palo Alto was then initially smashed by Zimbardo, this signified the same lack of care, leading to similar acts of vandalism. This example suggests that, regardless of location and association with care and trust, seemingly neglected behavior encourages neglected behavior. As it relates to homelessness, the individual experiencing homelessness engaging in activities such as panhandling, loitering, or occupation of public space is thought to function as the first broken window, opening the door for like behavior to persist. As Zimbardo posits with the broken window theory, an unsupervised individual experiencing homelessness opens the door for even more dangerous crime to persist, thus having a detrimental consequence on the city's social order. Through anti-nuisance laws that may be argued as a means to foster greater community safety, opposite effects have been exhibited. For one, when anti-nuisance laws outlaw actions such as panhandling, loitering, or sleeping in public spaces, all seemingly harmless acts, individuals may turn to more dangerous and less acceptable crimes to sustain an income. This idea was demonstrated in a 2000 Toronto study where panhandling in the form of squeegeeing windshields in public intersections was banned. 3 years after following the ban, researchers O'Grady and Green were interested in how these individuals now gained an income. Their findings found that squeegee workers who sold drugs tripled from 6 to 19%, and their participation in prostitution increased from 6 to 9%. These results suggest the presence of a shift to more dangerous crime when homelessness is criminalized. In addition, when officers' primary focus is enforcing anti-nuisance laws, they are less likely to allocate adequate resources and time towards addressing more dangerous crime. A Las Vegas study exhibited this effect when the city took steps to increasingly narrow their anti-nuisance laws, increasing punishments and sweeps of encampments. In doing so, however, the crime rate increased by 13%, active officer count lowered by 15%, and the police budget remained lower than targeted. Thus, while anti-nuisance laws' primary justification lies upon increasing public safety within cities, it seems to have the opposite effect, increasing crime rates and diverting officer resources toward the wrong type of crime. Another rationalization for the implementation of anti-nuisance laws on individuals experiencing homelessness is that their ability to carry out their lives in the eye of the public harms tourism and therefore the economy of affected cities. Homelessness may decrease the aesthetic appeal of a city, and this may deter both tourists and investors, both of which contribute to the productivity of these cities. Whereas this argument may be targeted toward promoting the well-being of cities and those residing within, both economically and visibly, it crucially fails to account for the complex harm inflicted upon these individuals facing homelessness, those being punished as a direct result of this rationale. Individuals facing homelessness find themselves on the street not because they choose to, but because of lack of a choice. When subject to high fines for crimes classified under anti-nuisance laws such as panhandling, it's likely for these fines to accumulate as individuals facing homelessness are more likely to be unable to afford them. Although individuals facing homelessness may have work, it's likely that the work is extremely strenuous, and what may be considered work to them is likely illegal under anti-nuisance laws. Salinger cites that a typical week's income for moderate and high-functioning homelessness in New York is $70 to $200 per week. Although this is considered income, it is far from enough to live a minimally decent life in New York, especially when subject to constant fines for daily activities of living on the street. Moreover, when individuals are unable to pay their accumulated fines, they become subject to jail time. Not only will this result in the individual losing their work, but it may also have significant impact on potential for future employment, social services, and benefit qualifications. On top of this, the stigma associated with incarceration will be placed upon the individual forever. When weighing this scenario from all sides, rather than going to jail, the alternative would be for the individual experiencing homelessness to pay their fines. However, in doing so, they become less equipped for future self-sufficiency in regard to affordable housing and attaining upward mobility. In considering this, the question of whether there are some nuisance behaviors that should be punishable, those that may be harmful to these individuals and the others around them arises. Further standardization and differentiation of which actions can be deemed harmless versus harmful to the general public should be weighed in how anti-nuisance laws are enforced. The criminalization of homelessness through implementation of anti-nuisance laws is an overly expensive yet ineffective way to address individuals facing homelessness if the goal of these laws is to promote the well-being and betterment of these individuals, which it should be. It becomes clear that in the act of enforcing these laws, those facing homelessness often face costs so detrimental that they will have a lesser chance of escaping homelessness than if those anti-nuisance laws were not enforced. Rather than employing all resources to forcefully remove these individuals from streets through fines and jail time, the focus should be shifted towards housing, access, and availability, which has been found to be cheaper and more effective alternative to addressing homelessness. TARS highlights an example of housing being used as a remedy for homelessness through a study in Charlotte, North Carolina, finding that the city saved $2.4 million over the course of a year after creating a housing-first facility, as tenants spent 1,050 fewer nights in jail and 292 fewer days in a hospital, and had 648 fewer visits to the emergency room. With this, it is clear that affordable housing creates lasting positive impacts on the lives of those previously facing homelessness. Local cities should take more individualized steps towards addressing the particular nuisance activities they see in their cities. If a city is seeing an increase in citations for public urination, rather than employing the time and manpower to distribute fees, put it towards the addition of public bathrooms in the areas most prevalently seeing these issues. Moreover, and if an individual is unable to pay their fines because of a lack of employment opportunities, cities may want to implement a stronger employment process that does not discriminate against individuals without housing or even create jobs that are specifically for these individuals. In addition, with the implementation of homelessness, police officers become a part of the problem, as these laws can be somewhat ambiguous, requiring officers to use their judgment and even forced to implement such laws. Rather than allowing the officers to employ best judgment practices, cities may consider implementing more standardized training focusing on protecting and serving for officers assigned to those teams. Even further, cities could create teams more specifically designated to addressing and work with the individuals facing homelessness so that a better sense of trust, knowledge, and familiarity will be built between both parties. This may be particularly crucial to individuals with disabilities as well. A successful example to be considered comes from Houston's homeless outreach team that was created from a team of officers and a mental health professional with the intention of providing individuals facing homelessness with resources and access to housing and bus fare. The program was a successful example and should be considered an alternative to more brutal police forces nationwide. Criminalizing homelessness will not solve its perceived negative consequences to the safety and well-being of city residents. It will not make homelessness disappear. Individuals facing homelessness are typically facing these circumstances beyond their control, and the enforcement of anti-nuisance laws only serves to perpetuate homelessness, keeping these individuals confined through the accumulation of fines, jail time, and long-term negative stigma. While it is not enough to say that affordable housing and access to thereof reallocation of funds going towards the criminalization of homelessness through anti-nuisance laws and eliminating housing discrimination will solve the issue, these practices are a substantial step in the right direction. The ways in which humans look at, value the well-being of, and perceive the complex factors contributing towards individuals facing homelessness will equally play part in considering how homelessness should be addressed in the attempt to eradicate it for good.